You're listening to Track Talk with the Racing Boys, brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet in Olathe, or visit them online at McCarthyChevyKC.com.
Welcome back to Track Talk, brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet. That's right, McCarthy Chevrolet in Olathe. Check them out online, McCarthy Chevrolet KC. No, there's two ways to get a hold of them in there, Kirk. McCarthyChevrolet.com and McCarthyChevyKC.com. So you can do it either way. And again, we want to thank Brian. I know you're listening for McCarthy Chevrolet coming on board with us. All right, let's get to the phone right now and talk to a good friend of the Racing Boys for many a years, Dave Argabright. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing very well, Scott. How are you? Good morning.
We're doing well, and received the new book in the mail just, I think it was yesterday, Sprint Car Salvation, a Jimmy Wilson racing adventure. Now, this is something a little bit different for you, isn't it, Dave? This is a fictional book about a character that you created, and you kind of wrote the Best of Times series of stories in Sprint Car Midget Magazine. Take us through that and just how this all came about.
Well, it was sort of an accident when we started originally, Scott, doing the fictional series in the magazine. We just sort of did it as a whim to try to do something different and have a little bit of fun, and it just really kind of took off. And I couldn't go anywhere where people didn't say, hey, when are you going to put that series in a book? So finally, this fall, I got busy and got the first volume out.
Yeah, well, can you give us a little idea about the character, Jimmy Wilson, and kind of set the stage of what this book really talks about and the storyline of it?
Well, the story is set in the mid-'70s, and Jimmy Wilson is the main character, and he's an aspiring USAC sprint car racer, and he lands a ride with one of the prominent teams, and there's a lot of team drama, a lot of personality conflict, just like we've always seen in racing. And throughout the story, it's just Jimmy trying to make his way and all the different characters and situations he encounters. And what I really tried to do is capture the flavor of what racing was 30, 40 years ago, and it was a little more fun, a little more innocent, I guess, and just leads to lots of different possibilities story-wise.
You know, there's some people out there, and you know as well as anybody like Jack Hewitt, there's some guys that this story is probably not much different than a true story for some of them, right?
Well, the advantage about a story like this is anybody that's been around racers at all, right, I could tell a story that's so outrageous with the most unlikely ending and the most unbelievable characters, but anybody that's been around racing would say, oh, yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, there's almost no limit to what racing people are capable of.
Dave, this is Kirk. Congratulations on the new book. Can you compare Jimmy Wilson to a driver in the mid-'70s that would remind us of one of the stars back in that day?
Well, you know, I get that question a lot, Kirk. People ask me, who is this guy? Is this character based on so-and-so? And none of the characters, including Jimmy, are based on any one person that was a real person. It's sort of a composite where you take traits from this person that you knew and this person that you knew and use a lot of imagination. And then it sounds very strange, but as an author, once you start working with fictional characters, they really do kind of take on a life of their own. You just sort of have an intuitive feel for what that person would be thinking and what he would do and what would be consistent with his personality. But to answer your question, there is no one person I would really compare it to.
Is it easier or more difficult to write a novel than what you're used to writing based on biographies and such?
That's a great question. In a lot of ways, it's more difficult. In some ways, it's easier because, you know, you can do anything you want to. But, you know, when you do autobiographies with people, it's pretty straightforward in that there's the material. It's just your job to shape it into a good narrative. But in this case, I mean, sometimes when you stare at that blank screen trying to get something started on a new chapter, man, it is difficult because you got to call on your imagination and you got to really be creative. And it's not always easy to be creative, you know?
Yeah. Dave, are you going to continue to write the Best of Times in Sprint Car Midget Magazine so people, if they want, they could get out there and subscribe to that great publication? Is that something that you're going to continue to do?
Yeah, I enjoy doing it, Scott. I tell you, it's really fun once you get into this and get going, and I've had a good time with it. And I tell people all the time that ask me that question, hey, are you gonna keep this series going? And listen, as long as people are willing to read it, And as long as Doug Auld with the magazine is willing to run it, I know I'll be willing to ride it. I mean, I know I'm having fun, and I want to keep it going.
You know, there's so many great drivers that come out of that era of sprint car racing, and that's when men were men as far as I'm concerned. You know, we lost many drivers every year. It was pretty typical to lose several drivers per season because of, well, safety equipment isn't where it is today back in those days. Some of the guys that are no longer with us that stand out in your mind, you know, like the Judd Larsons or just name a few of the guys that come to mind that were real characters back in the day that maybe somebody that you would like to write a book about, or just somebody that stood out as somebody that's just got that personality.
Well, you know, Judd Larson was a little bit before my time. It's interesting that you make that note, but he and Jimmy Bryan, I always felt, were just people that I really, really wish I'd had the opportunity to meet because they were bona fide characters. I mean, they were just so interesting as people and larger than life, and I really would have liked to have met them. But I guess in my own era, I think about people like Robby Stanley, who I suppose by a lot of measures wasn't, the big character type person. He was actually more of a normal guy, but we lost him very young in a sprint car, and since he was a friend of mine, I think of him often and think about, gee, what if Robby were still around? I mean, that's a long time ago, but I think of that kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah.
It is Chili Bowl time. I'm sure that you're going to join us down in Tulsa, Oklahoma this next week. Your thoughts about who is, of course, we've talked about the Swindells the last 3 years, but your thoughts as to who to watch out for coming up the big week indoors down in Tulsa.
There's so many great racers out there. And, the interesting thing, Guy, about the Chili Bowl, it almost never fails to deliver. I mean, we come out of the wintertime, we go down there every year, and you wonder, boy, could this race be as good as it was last year?
Yeah.
And doggone, every year there's drama and usually a great race on Saturday night. And so I don't think it'll disappoint again. I think we've got a great cast of characters lined up for this weekend, a lot of really good racers. Obviously you got to tip your hat to the Swindells because right now they're on the top of the pedestal, and until somebody knocks them off, they're the king. And I don't know, Sammy is always awful good, and then Kevin winning it the last couple of years. I don't know. Somebody's going to have to really bring their A game to beat him.
Would Brian Clausen be that one guy?
Could be. There's several.
There's a lot of them.
Brian's obviously great. Stewart's won it before, and, he really wants to win that race. He doesn't just come to race. I look at Michael Pickens in the race that he drove last year, and that kid is due. I mean, he's a heck of a racer. In terms of the Chili Bowl, Chris Windham, he's won the Hard Charger Award there twice. If he could have a year where he could get in early and get a good starting spot instead of having to work his way from the back, that guy could win it too. So there's a lot of guys that are fun to watch there, and it's wide open.
Yeah, the Wilkie Pack car is going to be interesting to watch with Wyndham and Dave Darlin, Brady Bacon running on.
Dave, he wants to win in the worst way.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of guys that could win this event down there. Unfortunately, luck plays in such a part of this thing that, you can have the fastest car down there, and that's not going to get you into victory lane. And I've got to feel that Sammy's motivated more than anything to outrun his son, Kevin. Because, Sammy doesn't like losing even to his son. You could see him after his son won back-to-back that wasn't setting well with Sammy. Sammy is on kill all the time.
I mean, that's what's fun about this deal here. It's just, it's not the money. It's not the fact that it's, a trophy, whatever. But, man, this race is all about pride. I mean, most races are, but this one especially. We only get to do it once a year. It's the best of the best in terms of the characters that it draws. It's racers from all over the country and all different types of racing. I think, there's an emotional attachment to this race that's beyond just about all the other short track races out there.
Yeah. What does it mean about the drivers that come out of open wheel racing? You got Smoke winning his third championship. You got Ricky Stenhouse Jr. winning the Nationwide Series championship. You've got all these great guys that are really competitive down south. Doesn't that say something about the talent of driver that comes out of open wheel racing?
We've said it a long time now. When you race short tracks, you really learn how to race. It's not just about how to drive the car. You learn how to race. And I have to think that that comes in pretty handy, whether you're talking about, nationwide or a cup or any type of racing you want to advance to. When you learn how to race, you learn how to take care of your car, you learn how to give and take. That makes you a better racer, and I think that shows with guys like Stewart and Stenhouse, for example.
Yeah, really happy for Ricky this year, too. That was really big, and we're really happy for him. And a good guy that seems like he's still well-grounded as well. So it's good to see him win that championship his first time. Dave, thanks so much for being on the show again. The book is Sprint Car Salvation, a Jimmy Wilson Racing Adventure. Dave Argabright, you are the man. Anything new coming up that you're working on right now, Dave?
No, I got to do a Jack Hewitt reprint sometime this year, and I want to try to get another Jimmy Wilson type volume out before the end of 2012 to kind of keep the string going. And beyond that, I want to get a new project started. Just not exactly sure what I'm going to do.
Hey, Dave, before I let you go, I want to get your thoughts about the recent press conference that the IndyCar Series had, going through the cause of the major crash out in Las Vegas. Your take on where IndyCar is at right now after the tragic loss of Dan Weldon in October, and your thoughts about what happened after that press conference that IndyCar held.
Well, I think that there was certainly nobody could say they didn't do a serious look at what happened in the accident. I mean, in my lifetime as following racing, I don't ever remember any sort of a detailed investigation. This is almost unprecedented to investigate at such a great detail one accident. But it was very unfortunate, obviously, and nobody likes that kind of thing, but it's a part of our sport. I'm disappointed in the direction of IndyCar right now in that they're really going away from ovals far too much to suit me. I mean, that's the heritage of that sport, and I think the more they go away from ovals, the tougher time they're going to have to work their way in front of the mainstream America and build a television audience and maintain viability. I think they're at a crossroads right now, and if they can't get some more ovals this year and next, I think they're going to be in serious trouble long term.
Dave, is it fair to say that something needs to be done, or they have to look at these ovals to make the IndyCar Series safer, though? At the same time, there's so many people that think there needs to be some kind of head cover or something for the car, and that takes away from the history of the sport. What's your feelings on that? Should there be something done? Should there be maybe a cage put over the top of these guys a little bit more, or should they put something around them to save them if they get into a situation like Dan had where the top of the car gets into the fence? What can we do there in that department?
Well, the first thing, I don't like the current formula where you're running flat around the racetrack.
Right.
It's like restrictor plate racing. You're inviting accidents then, and the best way to prevent somebody from getting hurt is to avoid the accident in the first place. And I don't like when you're racing so close in a pack. It's exciting to watch, but it's you can't do that forever without somebody getting some stuff torn up or even hurt. And I'd like to see them go back to cars that overpower the racetrack, where you got to pedal the car around the racetrack, where you got to get clear out of the gas and use the brake to get into the corners. The cars will separate a little bit more, and you'll see a lot more passing, I think. So that's the first thing. But I don't think it'd be too much to look at some sort of a roll cage, some sort of I don't think we need a roof, because honestly, if we're going to put a roof on them, forget it. Let's just go stock car racing. An IndyCar with a roof is just the greatest oxymoron that's ever been introduced. And so, I don't think you need a roof, but some sort of a roll cage, rollover bar that's a little bit bigger, sure. Look into that.
We see a lot of the guys with the sprint cars now. They put a little some bars that go directly over their head. That way, if they're out there running and they get upside down and the car makes contact with the front bumper to the top of the car, that they have a little bit of protection. It could be that simple, I think. So
right. I do think they've got to look at something over their head a little bit more, because I've thought this for a long time. Originally the open wheel cars, we built a roll cage to protect them, and then quietly, slowly, that went away in Indy cars, and there was just sort of an old-time rollover bar, and everybody said, no, they're sitting far enough down in the car, and these cars don't get upside down like they used to, and I think, that's a mistake. I think we've got to get some sort of greater protection over the driver, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I think we lost Dave right there on that note.
No, I'm here.
There you are, Dave. Okay, well, listen, thanks so much for being on the show. I think that's coming from you. It's words of wisdom, as far as what some of the things that we could do in the future. And Dave, thanks so much for always taking the time to talk to Kirk and I on Saturday mornings, and we'll see you down at the Chili Bowl next week, my friend.
I appreciate it. And good luck with all your broadcasts this week, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Dave. And you can go to daveargabright.com and order the book, Sprint Car Salvation. Of course, he's got all the other books, too, Fast Company. It's kind of a, iconic right now that Speedy Bill celebrating 60 years with Speedway Motors this week. So got the book Fast Company, Lone Wolf, the story of Doug Wolfgang, Earl, and all the great books, daveargabright.com.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll take your phone calls when we come back. 913-381-810. 913-381-810. Track Talk brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet. We'll be right back.